right, so far we've talked about the beat, we've talked about rhythm, we've talked about meter. In this segment, we're going to look at pitches and melody, which is really the most interesting part of the music for the average listener at any rate. So we've had our beat, we've got the rhythm, we've got all the things that are going sort of horizontally for us. Now we need to look at some sounds that go up and down, because that's what makes a melody. So what is the melody? The melody is what you would normally call the tune. So when you're listening to your favorite song on the radio and you're singing along, that's the melody. But a lot of the music you'll listen to for this class doesn't have any words. So you have to be able to pick out the melody out of all the things that might be happening. So that means you need to really understand the construction of a melody so you know what to listen for. Let's start with pitch, because we really haven't talked about that yet. We've just had sort of one note sounds, and now we're going to get some variety. So we're here with our beautiful Steinway piano, which has 88 keys. So we think, do we really have to know 88 notes? No, musicians are sort of lazy in some respects. We like to keep things as simple as possible for ourselves. So we really only have 7 letter names. We start at A, we go to G. And then once you get to G, we're back at A again. So we just do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So we have a very limited set of letters to choose from. So that gives us 7 pitches to choose from. And we call those pitches. If you're a sciencey, geeky kind of person, the technical term for a pitch is frequency. So when we talk about things in terms of hertz, it's the same thing as pitch. It's just a more scientific and precise measurement. So we try to tune instruments normally to a hertz of 440 for this note. A is 440. So if you hear that, that's what we're talking about. That's the vibration level that we want for that pitch. So we have all these pitches, go from A to G. That takes care of the white notes. Now we've got the black notes to deal with. So the black notes have different names depending on their relationship to white notes. So we'll start with that A that we just had. You can see there are black notes above and below this A. So we'll start with the one that's below it. So we have A, we have the note that's just below it. We call the notes relationship to each other. So we have the note that we started with, the one that's just below it is considered to be the flat of that note. And if you think about your car having a flat tire, it's going to sink down, it's going to be lower, that'll help. So A, the note below it, A flat. If we go the opposite direction, we go up from A to the next note that's right next to it. That's called a sharp. And if you sit on a tack that's sharp, you'll jump up, and so you'll be higher, and that'll help remember that as well. So we have A flat, A sharp. But let's look at this A flat note again. It's also the note above G. So we have A flat, here's G. So if we start thinking about this note in terms of its relationship to G, it gets a new name. It's now above G, so it's called G sharp if you're coming at it from that direction. A flat from this direction. Sounds exactly the same. Why would we care? It has to do with keys and scales and sorts of things like that we'll talk about in another segment. So for now, it's just know that everything has more than one note. I'm going to give you a reference for a website called the Virtual Keyboard, which is really cool because you'll be able to take the things that I talk about here, go to that keyboard, it's got the names of the notes on it, and I'll give you some patterns that you can work with so you can do your own scales and chords, so you'll get a chance to sort of fiddle with that yourself and see how those things work together. All right, so now we've got our pitches. And as I say, we have lots of them on here, but we're going to stay in a limited range today. So we're going to take those pitches, add them to rhythm, and create a melody. Something that we could theoretically sing. Not all melodies are particularly singable. If we get to the modern period, we'll see that a melody might be... You're not going to sing that. You won't even recognize that as being a melody, but that would have been the composer's intent. But for the most part, melodies have some characteristics that help us to know that it's a melody. The first thing a melody has that you need to know about is movement. And we talked about movement in the segment when we were talking about concert programs and what you might see, and that a movement was a segment of a section of a piece. When we talk about movement with regard to melody, we're talking about the way the notes move. And there are only 3 things that can happen. One is the easiest. It's just that the note never changes. I'm just a lot of repeated notes. That's one thing it can do. Another thing that a melody can do is move by steps. So going from one note to its neighbor on the keyboard. It's nice to use the keyboard for this because you can actually see the relationships. So starts out with steps. That's all steps. A little jumping in there. So they stay close together. They mostly just move one note at a time. That's stepwise motion. And the third thing that can happen is that the notes can skip. So you can see that those are all over the place, lots of gaps in between the notes. So we have stay the same, move by steps, move by skips. So we have a couple of technical terms that go with that. If we're talking about a melody that moves mostly by steps, we say that that melody is conjunct. Conjunct, if you remember, con means with, together. That'll help you keep that straight. And if it jumps a lot, then we call that disjunct. So it's dysfunctional, sort of, you know, all those things have similar kinds of roots. So conjunct by steps, disjunct by skips. So that's the first thing, we have movement. The second thing that a melody has is a range. A range is the distance from the lowest note in the melody to the highest note in the melody. So some melodies have fairly small ranges. Children's songs usually have small ranges, and that's because children's voices can't sing very wide notes, so that works for them. A lot of popular song has a fairly narrow range. It makes it much more singable for you, the person out in the audience who's trying to sing along. So that melody was mostly conjunct, even though we start with a leap. From there on, it's just steps, so it's mostly conjunct, fairly narrow range. Some melodies are a little wider. That one goes 8 notes. We went from D to D, so that's a little bit wider range. Some melodies have a very wide range. And then we skip to the high part that everybody knows. So we have the distance there from this C to this G, way up here for the Star Spangled Banner. And that's what makes it sometimes more challenging to sing. So we look at the range, narrow, medium, wide. And remember, you're only looking at the melody. So when we start adding other parts to it, don't think, oh, well, there's a tuba player down there playing a really low note, so it must have a very wide range. We're really only interested in the melodic part. So think about that part, not anything else that happens out here in the fringes somewhere. So we're thinking about those elements. So now we have the way the melody moves. We have a range. The third thing that a melody has is a shape. So we could actually sort of draw pictures of our melodies. If we drew a picture of that, we'd just sort of have this, a jump up, and then sort of a stair step that came down. If we did our jingle bells, it would be more dynamic in its movement. If we did the Star Spangled Banner, it'd be like, and we could connect that all with a line. So most melodies actually they're sort of wave-like. By the time you get it all drawn out, it would be just a line that goes up and down and maybe has some stretches that are fairly flat. So movement, range, and a shape or a contour. Those are the 3 elements of a melody. So now we know what a melody sort of looks like. How do we know it's the melody when there's so many other things going on? One is that you should be listening for repetition. A good melody is going to have enough of repetition for you to sort of grab onto that, like a hook, something that gets your attention and you can focus on. So we're going to use Jingle Bells for our example for this. So here's the verse part of Jingle Bells. See, that's very repetitive. We have that da 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 da. Different pitches, so it doesn't get too monotonous, but it's recognizable as being a unit, it's cohesive, and it ends on a pitch that sounds like an ending. So that's the verse part of it. Think about the chorus now. It had a lot of repeated notes, so we had movement that was much more static. Instead of going up and then back down, we had repeated, and then we went down and up. So we reversed the pattern. So it's different enough from the first part to get your attention, and it tells you that this is still melody because it's got its own inherent pattern within itself. So when you're listening to melody, you're listening for repetition and contrast. If you don't have contrast, you'd be bored out of your mind. Let's take this. That song actually goes like that for quite a long time. That's not the melody though. Yes, it's repetitive, but there's no contrast. So that's just what we would call a melodic ostinato, a pattern that has melodic kind of characteristics, but it's just repeated and repeated and repeated. It's not the thing you're going to go home singing, probably. So think about contrast, think about repetition. As you listen to melodies, think about how they're moving. Are they conjunct? Are they disjunct? Do they stay the same a lot? What kind of range does it have? And can you sort of visualize a shape for it? So those are our elements of melody. We're going to start that, put it together with our rhythm, which we've had because we could have made rhythms out of all those things. And now let's add some other elements to it.